you for your tenacity and staying with us and making sure that you'll be with us this morning for this really super presentation. As you know that today we're British Columbia Advanced Practice, and we are really pleased to be able to show you our team. So Dr. John Higginbottom, really this is his brainchild, so we're very grateful to him for being the founder of British Columbia Advanced Practice. Regina, you hear from me often. Manny's on the line. She's our really good technical expert, along with Jen as well. So you've been seeing lots of emails from both Manny and Jen. So big thanks to them. And they're in their backgrounds, just making sure that our technology is tickety-boo. And Jordan, he's the man who really set up this whole platform for us. So we're very grateful to him as well. So just so you know your team, and you know that our initial funding came from the Ministry of Health to provide leadership, education, and guidance to the mental health field to develop and put evidence-based psychosocial rehabilitation practices into place. We are so very grateful to all of the people who spend their time with us to talk to us about different topics. And as you probably know, we have a tiny bit of funding, and those lovely people really don't get remunerated for this kind of work. But we're very grateful to them for bringing their expertise to this platform. So big thanks to people for doing that for us. You might also know that our funding will be running out in August. So this is your time. If you have maybe a program that you're really proud of, that you would like to tell the rest of the country about, please contact us, let us know. We would love to hear from you. We really, like I say, our funding will be running out and we want to go out with a bang. So we want to just make the most of our time. So if you really a little bit scared about the technology, please don't be, because we'll do our best, very best to support you. But if you have a program that you're running that you think really merits a chance to share that information, we really want to hear from you. So please contact us and let us know. We notice several old friends on the line here today, so I just, for confidentiality's sake, I really try not to mention people's surnames, but just so many people who just have been loyal over the years, and we're very grateful to see your names here on the left-hand side of our screen today. So thanks again for spending time with us. We also do really want to hear from you about an evaluation. So afterwards, you'll get an email asking you to let us know how the session was and what you got out of it. And so please, we really do appreciate that feedback. I know that it's hard to do that in your busy day, but we really look at each and every piece of feedback. So for example, from our last webinar, we were only really able to get 7 pieces of feedback, but we really do appreciate your time. And Jen has just mentioned that we are transitioning to a new email platform, and that's just to be concordant with the new laws of Canada, confidentiality laws. So please do connect with us. I know you're on the line today, but maybe just share to others who have not been able to connect with us that the only way that we can get in contact with you is for you to return those emails and just say, yes, please sign me up. So we have lost lots of people, but we really want to try and stay connected with our community, because we think that's what our job is, to really help keep us connected and in touch with emerging and promising and evidence-based practices. So please let us know. And this last piece is just that email. So please just don't forget to spend a few minutes just reconnecting with us. So just as I move into the slides, it is my great pleasure to introduce you today to our wonderful presenter, Angela Louie. So I just want to do a bit of a shout out to Fraser Health Authority and to wonderful people in Fraser Health Authority who have presented many times on this platform. So Angela, who's with us today, has worked in mental health field for over 25 years in acute care, day program, and community mental health settings. She's currently the coordinator of rehabilitation and recovery in Fraser Health, mental health and substance use. And over the past 10 years, she's championed the recovery-centered clinical system within Fraser Health. She's participated in delivering education sessions on living at risk clinical practice guidelines, which align with the recovery approach. She's an accredited speaker and was the silver medalist at 2005 World Championships of Public Speaking. So we are very grateful to have Angela's expertise and with us today. I'm just going to change over the slides to set up our platform for Angela's presentation. And in the meantime, I do just want to wish you a very, very happy St. Patrick's Day. And you know that I've got that good Irish accent. But I just want to begin by wishing you a very happy and safe St. Patrick's Day. So with that in mind, over to Angela for our presentation today. Thank you.
Terrific.
Oh, so sorry.
Okay.
Just start the web camera. And there we go.
Okay, terrific. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me, talking about living at risk. So you might ask yourself, why do we need to think about living at risk? So we're going to talk about a few different aspects of risk, especially when it comes to our work in mental health. So we'll talk about some of the concepts within the CPG or the clinical practice guideline that I'll share a part of, the values that underlie that, and some examples and some discussion about how we are starting to think through these situations. And we'll have time for hopefully some, questions, discussions, certainly at the end, but maybe throughout as well. Which one do I press?
There you go.
Oh, that one. Okay. So why do we need to think about living at risk? And I think this is something that no matter what part of the mental health service continuum you are in, you are probably working with people who may be putting themselves at risk or putting other people at risk. And in fact, if you think of your own life, the nature of life, of all of our lives, is to be at risk and to make decisions to live at greater or lesser degrees of risk, whether it's for illness, injury, death, or any other kind of risk. So it's not just our clients or the people we serve that are facing these situations. All of us have to make these decisions every day. So I'm going to ask you a question, and that is, in your own life, at some point this week, did you drive faster than the speed limit? So you can think about whether the answer is yes or no. You can be honest with yourself. And I can say in my own life that yes, I did drive faster than the speed limit at some point this week. So if you think about even that one situation, that decision you probably made without even thinking about it. We make these decisions in our day-to-day lives all the time. But underlying those decisions are our values. Why did we decide to drive faster than the speed limit, even though it's the legal limit? It's in the law, but we might have our own reasons. For instance, maybe it's really important to us to be punctual. And if we left home at a little bit later, we thought, okay, it's worth the risk of speeding in this area so that I can get there punctually. Or maybe it's to do with your relationship with someone that, you needed to get somewhere faster. Or maybe it was an emergency. So all of these decisions are based on our values. And if you think about it, each one of our values might be slightly different. We might be speeding for different reasons because different things are important to us. So the same thing goes for the people we serve. The people we serve are also making decisions, and they're making decisions based on what's important to them. And that is the part of life that we want to be able to support and to think through. So I've just written out some examples of some risky behaviors we might be seeing in our work. So for instance, maybe one of the people we serve has some problematic substance use. Maybe they're living in a facility and they are using drugs, they're bringing home alcohol, something like that. Something I've seen in a facility is a swallowing risk. Somebody is has a choking, susceptible to choking, but they really don't want to take the recommendation of the recommended diet. Maybe one of your clients wants to drive a car. They want to drive a motorcycle. Maybe somebody has been diagnosed with a serious medical condition, but they don't want to go for treatment. Maybe somebody else has a risk for falls, but they don't want to take any safety precautions or use any aids. Maybe somebody has COPD and they don't want to quit smoking. So there are a lot of things that, you know, as a staff or as a person who's serving people might see these are risky behaviors, and they can cause us some distress. So I'd like to take a moment, if you would, to type in maybe an example of a risk that you've seen in your work, something that you've seen, maybe your clients have taken a risk that put themselves at risk, or that puts somebody else at risk. And I'm just going to read some of these out as you type. And it's okay, people are typing. I can hardly wait to see what you're saying. Homelessness. Yeah, absolutely. So people might be at risk for homelessness, maybe putting their housing at risk. Prostitution, smoking, picking up drugs, yeah, in a local restaurant, continued drug use, being unhealthy eating, refusing medications, yes, HIV disclosure, running while pushing a wheelchair, okay, that might be putting somebody else at risk, yeah, refusing support. So there, we come upon many, thank you for typing in, sexual favors, for cigarettes, yeah. So lots of different situations where people put themselves at risk. And I think what ends up happening is, you know, it's really, we feel like we are in a difficult situation. So for us at Fraser, you know, why do we need a clinical practice guideline? We have faced probably what some of you have faced in describing these situations. We have felt distress, you know, so when you're coming upon the situation, the staff may feel distressed. You know, what do we do? How do we handle this? Other people, maybe it's in a residential facility, maybe other people feel distressed, maybe the family feels distressed. And then the other thing that plays into this is some inconsistent approaches. So it might be that maybe one staff says one thing, and on another shift, another staff says another, maybe a family member says another thing. So we haven't really had a way of dealing with these situations in a way that's consistent. So it really depends on the values of the person that they're talking to. So that becomes problematic if you're looking at, you know, how do we approach these kind of situations when everybody may feel differently about it? So that's what this guideline was really meant to help us to do. Okay, I'm just going to put all of these up here. So because these kinds of situations are based on values, then we need to ask ourselves, whose values are important? If we each have different values, whose values are important? So, you know, when you're developing a process, it's really important to have, as much as you can, a representative group of stakeholders, people who have different perspectives on the situation, because then you will hear different voices about what's important. So the process of coming together and deciding this is really just as important as the outcome. So once you have a representative, you know, as much as you can, group of stakeholders with different voices, then you start the discussion of, okay, what are the most important values? So these are 5 of the top values that informed this guideline. And so when you come to, you know, some kind of agreement that, you know, you have these top 5 values that are driving your decision-making process or your thinking process, then you need to ask yourself, okay, well, which is more important than the others? So in this case, these are actually ranked values. Number 1 is more important than number 2, is more important than number 3, is more important than number 4, is more important than number 5. But they are all important. They all do need to be addressed, but they are ranked in order of importance. So this is something that needs to be agreed upon. And for us, organizationally, this is the agreement that, this is the order of values, and this is the way we are going to be thinking through it. So, this is, different than, I have thought about things before. It helps to get everyone on the same page in terms of how we're going to think about this situation. So I'm hoping this makes sense so far. So safety of others is kind of our top priority. Respect for residents and their choices is second. Third is resident well-being, what's healthy for them. Fourth is support for staff who may be feeling distressed. And fifth is organizational integrity, making sure you're in line with policies of the organization is fifth. So let me talk a little bit more about this. So the whole reason why we have this guideline is to really bring some teeth and some meat into how we work in a recovery-oriented way. So if we say we have a recovery-oriented approach, how do we deal with these very difficult situations that is in alignment with a recovery approach? And especially if we are used to approaching the situation from a parental or paternal or directive approach. This is what's best for you, so this is what you need to do. So we're trying to get away from that and allowing people to actually make more of their own choices. So, so these are a few of the things we had in mind, that the recovery plans are consistent with the resident values. So values are coming into the planning process. We want a consistent approach to decision making. We want to make sure that the recovery plans that we're helping the client to write also include risk mitigation. So we're also thinking about risky choices in how we help somebody do the planning. This isn't a matter of, we're telling the client what to do. The client really is at the center and should feel supported in this process, as well as the staff team should also feel supported. We're also considering the natural supports and family and supporting them because, the outcome may not be in alignment with what they feel, what their values are. So hopefully to reduce distress for everybody so that everybody understands the thinking process we went through and why the decisions were made the way they were. So that's the reason why we wanted to use a consistent process. So the things that are included in this particular guideline, we have a decision-making algorithm. So we have a way of thinking through a situation, and we have some support tools to help people think through the situation. I'm thinking staff, but staff in collaboration with the clients. So I'm going to show you just some of the algorithms. So when I say algorithms, I mean like a decision tree or a way of thinking through a situation. So if we're thinking about a situation where someone is putting themselves or others at risk, the first question we want to ask ourselves is, could this decision or this behavior result in serious illness, injury, or death to a resident? So, we're not going through this whole process if the situation isn't really a serious risk. If somebody is deciding to walk in high heels rather than flat shoes, is that a serious risk of death? Well, probably not. So if it's not a serious risk, then what we want to do is to support the client, right? So always we want to support the client in the choice they make. And really, we're only coming to use this guideline if we're thinking, okay, somebody is going to be hurt irreversibly, somebody may die, other people in the residences may be harmed severely. So, and the situations that you wrote, that may be the case. So that's when we're really thinking through this. So if you look at this, it might be hard to see some of these words here, but at each stage, we're asking ourselves questions. So could the decision result in serious harm? So if it doesn't result in serious harm to the person, then we go right on to the next track. But if it does, then we ask ourselves, okay, well, we think this could actually result in something very serious happening to the resident, like maybe they're refusing cancer treatment. Then we ask ourselves the question, well, do they really understand and appreciate what that decision means? And, but they still want to engage in the behavior. So in this case, we have a number of, we have some tools that help us really tease out, do they really understand? Because I think often what happens with our clients is not only are they making decisions that we think may be risky, but they are compromised in some way. Maybe they have a cognitive deficit, maybe they, have a brain injury, maybe they have a developmental disability. So there could be many things that impact their decision-making abilities. So we do have some support tools that help our staff work through this. I'm trying to find it here, just to outline some of the things that we want to consider. Yeah, so we want to make sure that that we've done everything we can to help the client appreciate the consequences of their decisions. So, for instance, are we speaking in a language that they understand? Are we speaking at a level that they understand? Are we having conversations over time? Or are we just kind of, giving them a lot of information in one session and they haven't had a chance to process it? Are we being sensitive to where we have these conversations? Who's in the room when these conversations are being held? Maybe they need somebody else as a support. So there are lots of different things that I think we need to really spend some time on to make sure that the person appreciates the consequences of that decision, what that decision means to their life. So this is just a thinking process, and to help the staff to step back and to really support the client in the choice-making process. So then you can see that there are a lot of other decision tools or decision parts of the decision tree. I won't go through every single one. But you can see that at every point there's a question, and then you answer yes or no and go down the decision tree. But this is, I think, the most important thing, is that you want to spend enough time and to explore enough avenues to make sure that your client understands and appreciates this kind of situation. So if you've gone through all of that already and you think, okay, yes, in fact, this person does appreciate it enough, I can see that. So then we need to consider, what about other people? Are other people going to be harmed by this? It might be fine for, this person, they've decided to use drugs on the premises. They've made a decision. They understand the harm to themselves, but other people may be impacted. So how do we go through that thinking process? So then we ask ourselves questions again. Can the person modify their decision so that they eliminate the harm to others? So, so rather than maybe bringing the drugs into the house, are there some other safe, ways that are safer for the residents of that house? I'm trying to think of other situations, but if the person wants to smoke, rather than smoking in the bathroom in the house, are there some ways of that person smoking that does not put the whole house at a risk for fire or something like that? So there's a decision tree to work through dialoguing with the person, finding alternatives, making choices that will mitigate the harm to other people, because that is also another important consideration, especially when they're living with other people. So thirdly, there is, oh, did I miss one? Harm to others track. Policy track. So then thirdly, we want to make sure that this is also in alignment with our policies and procedures. You know, if there is a policy that there's no smoking within, I don't know what the rules are, 5 meters of the house, you know, are we in alignment with that? So that is another consideration. And the next track is the integrity track. So sometimes staff personal values come in conflict with the client's values. So for instance, maybe the client wants to have sexual relationships. They're not married to their partner maybe, and the staff feel very strongly for their own personal reasons that, you know, clients shouldn't be having sexual relationships. So how do they deal with those personal conflicts with their own values? So this is something that hopefully helps the staff deal with some of these conflicts. So the question is, are specific staff members feeling as though the decision to support the client compromises their own integrity, their own professional integrity? So if the answer is yes, it does, then we want to work with the staff to minimize the risk, educate everybody involved, make sure they understand the strategy and how they can be supported in maybe, you know, talking about the situation. Maybe it's just having support to deal with their own feelings. But in the end, if staff do continue to, you know, still disagree, the expectation is that if the decision is to support the client to, say, have a sexual relationship, that the staff are expected to fulfill their professional duties to support the client. So it's not that the staff's values trumps the decision to support the client. If we've worked through this whole process and said, yes, you know, we do need to support the client in this decision. So, you know, I think sometimes in the past, this has been the area that staff and clients have really come into conflict with, the staff values and the client values. So this hopefully gives us a process where, you know, the client's values and the client's choices of what's important in their lives really come first, and the staff values are considered in support of the staff afterwards. Okay. So I just want to ask you, so I know I've kind of raced through this, but I want to ask you how you think this approach to thinking through risky situations reflects a recovery approach. So this is where you get to do some work here and thinking about, okay, how do these two things align? And I'd love to see what your thoughts are. Self-determination, yes, absolutely. Dignity, harm reduction, yes. Respect, yes. Choice making, yes. And these are all the things that we are trying to promote when we're thinking about a recovery-oriented approach. Empowerment, being person-centered. The right to live at risk. Independence. Yeah. And respect. Yeah, and it's you know, especially for people, how much to enable versus how much to manage risk. Yeah, I mean, I think this is what staff deal with. And hopefully, you know, this isn't a panacea. It doesn't give you the answer, but it's a way for staff to think through a process that's values-based and we've already determined which values we're going to hold in higher, as most important. So that helps staff think through the situation in a consistent way. So the other thing I want to say is, this guideline originally was developed for our residential care programs because they had people who are living at risk, physical risk, maybe deciding to eat things that put them at a choking risk. And we adapted this to a mental health situation in residential care, in residential facilities. And these are often the people who have not made a lot of independent choices for a long time. So I think that's another reason why staff need to step back and take the time to really have these discussions over time in a way that relates to the client. Because if the clients are used to the staff, telling them how they're making decisions for them or how they're making decisions in their best interest, they might not have had a lot of opportunity or practice to think of what they think is in their best interest, or they might not have had much experience in the staff supporting them in making their decisions. They might have just made decisions and done things, hiding their own behaviors. So, this does take some, quite a lot of vigilance on the staff's part to really stay with the supportive stance rather than a directive stance. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, we're a little bit early. But maybe this is a good time to, if you've got some questions or you have some situations that maybe we can discuss. I mean, this is a huge topic, living at risk. And I do have I do have the guideline if anybody is interested to see the whole guideline, and we can certainly get that to you in some way.
So maybe it's Regina over Angela's shoulder, sorry. But maybe as we send out the evaluation, we can also attach this guideline, and that way you will get it. And so it might be also an encouragement to send in your evaluation as well. But that might be a good way to make sure we can distribute that for you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So can you talk about motivation and depression from the side effects of drugs or managing cravings? Yeah, so I mean, if somebody is using substances, that's going to affect their ability to make decisions, right? So, I mean, all of these things are considerations in terms of making sure that people are understanding the consequences of their choices. And not to say, so I mean, I think for substance use, the harm reduction approach is a really supported philosophy in terms of helping somebody make decisions and make choices and supporting them. So it's not about, okay, it's a black and white, you must do this or you mustn't do that. It's how do we support you to make, the choice that's going to be in your best interest, that you think is in your best interest, while reducing the risk for other people around you. Yeah, so motivation and depression. I'm not sure if I sort of got to that. Motivation and depression or managing cravings. So I guess if somebody is experiencing depression, that might affect their choices. So that I guess that's what you're getting to. I'm guessing that's what you might be getting to. So that might be part of your discussion with someone, is to help them, maybe to help them to see that may be impacting their decision making, or to it might be to bring things down to a very manageable choice. If they're looking at, okay, I'm depressed, and I have to decide whether I'm moving out or I'm moving with a roommate, it might be helping them to break down some of those things to something manageable. And I'm kind of making this up, but yeah. Okay, is Mental Health Act certification considered in this algorithm? Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I think that, so I'm going to talk about what I've seen in the tertiary programs, although, and it's, I think, less so the case, it should be less so the case in community residential programs. But in tertiary programs, because some of them are designated facilities, people are there committed under the Mental Health Act, and they don't have a choice necessarily of living there, and they don't have a choice of their psychiatric treatment. But that doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to make, say, medical decisions for themselves. And I know that one of the situations I heard about was a person who was there under the Mental Health Act, but who was they had swallowing difficulties. But he really still, his favorite food to eat was hot dogs and drinking Coke, but he was a choking hazard. And this put the staff in a real dilemma, So do we dictate that he cannot, drink Coke and eat hot dogs? That, the swallowing assessment and the recommendations say that, he needs to drink thickened liquids or, certain types of food. And so this was an ongoing discussion and conversation within the team and also with the resident. And they really had to tease out, was this resident competent to make that decision for himself? And so this took time to really tease out, okay, did he understand, what it meant if he was to drink Coke and eat hot dogs, how it might affect him, what might happen in the long run, how that could affect his quality of life. And over time, they did ascertain that he did understand that. But it was still more important to him to eat the things that he loved or to live the way that he wanted to live than to, just follow the recommendations of this safe diet. But that didn't mean that the staff said, okay, he's made this decision, we're not going to support him, we're, hands off. No, the staff still were there supporting him, if he was eating on site, maybe to, stay with him, maybe to watch him, monitor as he was eating, if he was choking or, had something caught in his throat, that they would be there to assist, and to have ongoing conversations about, whether this was still the way he wanted to go or not. So it was an ongoing support. It wasn't just a one-time thing with this resident. So in community residential facilities, it should be even more the case that the person has the choice and they should be supported more than, more than the staff intervening and saying no. So hopefully that helps. Okay. Let's see if there are any other. Okay. Yeah, because I think that's that is, I think, a question that many staff have. If they are on extended leave, does that mean that they don't have a choice of making risky choices? But in fact, we should be supporting people, and we should be thinking through that and supporting people to think through that themselves. Okay. What were the other goals of CPG's recovery plans consistent with resident values, consistent approach? What are the other goals? Okay, let me take a look. I mean, those are the five that are really outlined in our guidelines. But just maybe just to expand on that a little bit, that that we also want to consider, because the people we serve are not necessarily coming as a blank slate. So they might have come with their own experiences of trauma, maybe their own experiences of, social disadvantage. That's one of the reasons why we want to go through this very, pretty rigorous thinking process, because we don't want to disadvantage them more. We don't want to disempower people more than they have already experienced. And our systems, if you think about it, tends to privilege our value of physical safety. And that's a professional value, that we want people to be safe. We want people to be physically safe. And so we tend to make decisions that move people in that direction. Mm-hmm. When people themselves, if you think about people in their own lives, they may not actually make those choices themselves. So one of my personal examples, with my father had diabetes, pretty severe diabetes. He was on dialysis. And yet, he often made choices that, put himself at more risk. If you think about somebody who has diabetes, should be eating a very, clean diet, doesn't add to their physical harm. But, my father had his own ideas. And, eventually it led to more and more health issues. But he was afforded the right to make that decision. And I think, if we think about our own lives, we tend to make those decisions for ourselves anyways. So our clients should also be afforded those rights, if we think about it. Let's see. Yeah. Another question that sometimes comes up is about family and natural supports, because sometimes it's the family that is doing something that's putting the client in harm's way, or sometimes the family disagrees with the client's choices. Maybe the person wants to ride a motorcycle, and the family says, absolutely not. That's we should in no way be enabling this. But for us serving the client, it's really the client that's in the center, and we do want to support the family as well. But if those values or decisions are clashing with each other, our foremost obligation is to our client, and to support the family in their distress as well. Yeah, self-determination and personal responsibility. Okay, there was. Yeah, with the impending legalization of marijuana. Yes, this is right. Excellent way to help guide our conversations about the risk of use in a context where this behavior is no longer illegal and more widely accepted. Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are so many things that are risky. And we know that there might be risks involved, both to the person and to other people in the vicinity. So yeah, having a way of thinking through this is important. Okay. Okay. James is typing a juicy question.
So James, just as you're typing the question, it's Regine in the background. I'm curious too how you came to a place of identifying those. Well, I think you shared 5 values with us. Maybe there are others as well. But I'm curious what the organizational process was in kind of, just landing on those values. I'm curious about that.
So I wasn't involved in the development of this particular guideline, but I was involved in the development of another guideline, which is just as contentious sometimes, about sharing information. And I know in that process, our ethics department in Fraser Health helped us walk through this. So this guideline and other guidelines like this are based on the ethics approach that we have in Fraser Health. And it's a really nice, it's a values-based approach. And what they did, and it's actually relatively quick. I mean, you think that it would take you years and years to go through this, but it doesn't need to. But the first thing is to get a representative group as much as possible to begin with, so that you get people with lived experience, family members, professionals of different types, staff, support people. So all the people who might have a different perspective on, or who might be impacted by this situation. So when you get them together, then you talk about all the different values that people think are the most important. And there might be like a page-long list of things that are important. And then you go through a process of ranking them. So, it doesn't mean that everybody has the same opinion about what's most important, but as a group, you kind of come up with, as a whole, most people think this is the most important and this is second. And then once you have kind of a straw dog, then you have kind of an open forum. Okay, this is what we landed on based on how everybody is ranking them. Now let's make an argument. So if you think something should be higher than another, then you bring to the table, tell us why you think this should be higher or lower. And then we all, as a group, again, consider that. So there was a process of debating again, and some of them got moved. And in the end, when we came up with the ranking of these 5, then you kind of have to ask yourself, okay, can you live with this? Is this what we can hang our hat on? As a group and as an organization. So that's kind of the process.
Very helpful. Thank you.
I allow my participants to fall, but only for experiential learning and not for self-destruction. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me chew on that. Mm-hmm. Let me chew on that for a moment. So I guess I have a couple of questions. Experiential learning, not for self-destruction. So who decides what's for experiential learning and what's for self-destruction? Often, traditionally, it has been the professional or the staff who decides, okay, what's good for you to learn, and where do I say this is not good for you? So this process, I think, sometimes can be uncomfortable for staff because it puts the person in the front seat in terms of determining the direction they want to go. And I guess in this thinking process, I mean, once you have a chance to look at the guideline a little bit more fully, yes, I mean, if we are putting other people in harm's way, then there is some professional obligation that we may need to step in and intervene. If it is that person's own decision, knowing the consequences, then yes, we're going to support them. So for instance, I'll take the example of refusing cancer treatment. So we may think, okay, that is sure death for this person. And if we've spent some time really teasing out, maybe what they're fearful of, why they've made this decision, is this a decision they've made just because they're afraid of going to the doctor? So if we've really teased it out with them and they really have come to the decision that no, it goes against my values, I've lived a long life and I don't want to get treatment, I'm going to die with dignity or whatever it is, then, it's not for us to say, no, you are not allowed. Really, we're there to support them in their decision making and, as best as possible. So, so there's, I think, a lot to kind of think about. Okay. So the participant decides with fully informed decisions about alternatives and predicted as well as potential. Yeah, that is the important part. And that, I think, is the hardest thing, because the people we serve aren't always in a position where they have full capacity to make fully informed decisions, right? They might be impaired in many ways. So that's, I think, where we need to really kind of take the time with them. Yeah. And I think that, those are the dilemmas that we come upon that are the hardest. Yeah, I mean, people who have developmental disabilities as well as mental health issues maybe are also using substances, so it's not just one thing, but it's many things that might be impairing somebody. Okay.
So, Angela, something that was on my mind too that might add to the conversation or not, but as I heard us speak, I think that what I'm really learning is just keeping those values front and center seems essential. Mm-hmm. I was going to a place where would there be times where there's a dilemma between a recipient of care and a so-called professional person who's then also determined by professional behaviors. In other words, do no harm. So I'm just curious about that interface, and I'm not sure how old this policy is. So maybe
it was 2016,
right? But I'm just wondering if we've had some of those complex interfaces between those kinds of hard decisions. Mm-hmm. And I think to date we've talked about it through a sort of a personal values system. Mm-hmm. But are there times where there's going to be a rub? And have we thought about how to move forward?
Yes. I think often, I talked about staff personal values coming into conflict, but sometimes it's maybe what I would say is the staff perception of their professional values more than the actual professional values. So, when you say something like do no harm, it is the professional interpretation of what that harm is. Because, the idea of controlling somebody's choices and I'll be as bold as to say oppressing somebody also does harm. Disempowering somebody also does harm. Not allowing somebody's self-determination also does harm. So do we actually consider all the harms that we have traditionally imposed on someone and only consider the harms of that client's choice? So, these are the things that we're trying to mitigate and to really bring forward is that, we want to make sure that the person has the dignity of living a human life. That is part of the value that we want to promote, having the dignity that we are all afforded to make decisions for ourselves, within our social values. So, yeah, I mean, that's different than how we have typically thought as a service system. So it's.
I love how your service system, as you just said, just takes that values-based approach, because I guess there's so many complexities to this in terms of human rights, in terms of legal issues, in terms of ethics. It's complex, isn't it? Like it's multidimensional.
And I think for some staff, and this was something that because in licensed programs, licensing, also wants to make sure that you've done your due diligence and you're not just putting people in harm's way willy-nilly. So something like this is really appreciated by licensing because it shows to them that the staff are really going through their due diligence and making sure that they are providing support in whatever the decision is. That it's not just, sometimes how it is now is a decision is made, there's no rhyme or reason sometimes between one decision that staff make or another decision that another staff makes. So here it's clearly outlined and, in this case, documented about the thinking process. Yeah. Okay.
I think we just need to scroll back there a little bit.
Yeah, work with and not for, do with, not to. Yeah. So yeah, these are the values, sort of the recovery values that we're hoping that we're consistent with. Okay. Are there any examples of conflicting values between two or more, not a staff resident values conflict? So I'm just trying to think of an example where two residents' values might conflict.
That's a hard one.
So maybe Sue, if you have seen something like that, maybe give me a little head start here. Yeah, I wonder if even the word allow infers that we don't think that it suggests domination over someone. Yes, that's true. Yeah, it is a hierarchical word. Although I think that this is the language that sometimes staff think with is permission and allow. And the thing is, a guideline like this hopefully supports staff as well because they know that this is supported by the organization. So if they're actually supporting the client to pursue a choice that they feel is risky and they're going through this thinking process, they are supported by the organization that they've done their due diligence. They've met their professional obligation. So that's the other thing from a staff perspective. Yeah. For example, sexual relations with another resident. So I guess if somebody is having a sexual relationship and another resident doesn't agree, I guess that's what this might be. So I guess if we go to the harm to others track and kind of go through that decision, then you have to think about, okay, so how can this one resident have a sexual relationship in a way that's not going to impinge on, or harm another resident? So are there ways of doing this where, it's not going to be, they're not going to have a sexual relationship or sexual intercourse in the living room while someone is trying to watch television? Is there another way to do this so that other people aren't as impacted? So, this takes some thinking through and discussion perhaps about what would work. Yeah. So, hopefully this is just giving you some food for thought to think about, okay, how can we think in a rigorous way about these situations and, in a more consistent way across staff. So if you're interested in seeing the guideline, it's like a policy document. It's kind of heavy, but it gives you an idea of what we've tried to do in Fraser in terms of helping give some meat to this way of thinking. And of course, although this was developed specifically for housing, a lot of these ideas you could see could apply in many different contexts. So, that's also something else. Was there work done with staff to identify or be aware of their own values? I don't know if there was something formal done with staff, but hopefully through working through some of these situations, staff may actually come to think about, okay, what's important to me. It's maybe less of a formal thing, but.
It does seem like this is a very powerful document in terms of shaping culture and implementing recovery.
Yeah, because it is consistent with a recovery approach, and I think it helps give some teeth to it. Because sometimes when you think about a recovery approach, it's like it's conceptual, it's really intangible, but this helps staff actually do something in a more standardized approach.
So I noticed James is typing, so I guess if anybody has any other questions or comments, very happy to receive those. Mm-hmm. We'll give that another minute or so.
Okay, yes, I think it's quite common for well-intentioned colleagues to have a takeover approach, yes, as opposed to a journey with approach, to synchronize traditional approaches with Western orthodoxy. And traditional, I guess you mean Aboriginal or Indigenous approaches, I'm guessing, as opposed to our, Western. Yeah, I think that is a big work in progress. I don't think we're near there yet. But yeah, traditional approaches are in line with PSR. Yeah, I'm hoping that we're moving the dial in terms of our Western approaches to be more in line with, not that they have to be in line with Indigenous approaches, but just more of a person-centered approach, humanistic approach, something that matches our changing social values. Mm-hmm.
So I see James is just maybe, there's Pam, sorry.
Yes, thanks, Pam, for taking this to your team. I think it's definitely something that is worth, if you have a team of people that you're, in dialogue with on a consistent basis, to bring these ideas back to your team over time, because it's a different way of thinking through things. Yeah, thanks so much, you guys.
And just to reiterate, for sure we'll be able to send you out the full guideline. It's a fairly substantial document.
22 pages.
22 pages. So you'll be able to just read that at your leisure. And I think it is a big area, isn't it? So there's a lot of information in there. And I think the joy of this presentation was to really begin to apply it to practice. So sometimes you need that piece of paper in front of you to be able to think about specific dilemmas. But hopefully this is a first step for you. So please expect that in your email, a copy of that, a PDF copy of the slides, and just a link to give us some feedback. Yeah. And yes, I agree with everybody. Thank you very much for a dynamic and thought-provoking session. Lots, as Danielle says, food for thought. So absolutely. So we look forward to hearing from you. And as we mentioned earlier, if there's something that you would like to speak about on this platform, we would love to hear from you. So please let us know that as well. And I guess just with that, maybe we will close it down. You have all of our email addresses. We look forward to hearing from you. we, as I mentioned, wish you a very, very happy St. Patrick's Day. I was also curious what Angela was talking about the risk of motorbike. I mentioned wish you a very, very happy St. Patrick's Day. I was also curious what Angela was talking about the risk of motorbike. So I was just thinking about putting the insurance on my motorbike again for the season. So I might ponder that for another moment, but I think I'm going to do it anyway. Wish you all a very happy weekend and